Heda is playing ShuYun, and he keeps an opening hand with Crypsis, Tormenting Voice, Fumble, Spire Bluff Canal, a Plains, Temple of Epiphany, and Cloud Shift. Mauricio's playing Niv Mizzet, Perun, keeping a Soul Ring, Fateful Showdown, Nivix Guildmage, Ionize, Island, and an Evolving Wilds. JD is playing Karlov of the Ghost Council, keeping an Ajani, Adversary of Tyrants, a Crested Sunmare, Soul Ring, Pristine Talisman, Temple of the False God, Shambling Vent, and a High Market. I'm playing my Wort the Raid Mother deck, keeping a Primal Command, Tooth and Nail, Reiterate, Eternal Witness, Skull Clamp, Reliquary Tower, and a Forest. I roll the highest, and I get to go first. I play Reliquary Tower and pass. Heda plays a tapped Temple of the Epiphany, scrying 1 as it enters, passing when he's done. Mauricio plays an island untapped and passes. JD plays a tapped Shambling Vent and passes. I play a forest and cast Rampant Growth, searching my library for a basic mountain, and pass. Heda untaps and plays a Spire Bluff Canal untapped, then casts Tormenting Voice, discarding a card and drawing 2. Before his end step, Mauricio casts Brainstorm, drawing 3 and choosing 2 to put on top of his library. Mauricio untaps and plays an Evolving Wilds, then taps his island for a Soul Ring, passing to JD. JD untaps and plays a Plane. Taps a Shambling Vent to cast his own Soul Ring, then taps the Soul Ring and the Plane to cast Pristine Talisman, passing. I untap and play a mountain. I tap 4 lands for Amina and Den, Wildborn, passing. Heda untaps and plays a plane, passing. Mauricio untaps with no land drop, casts Nivix Guildmage. At the end of Mauricio's turn, JD taps his Talisman for 1 mana and gains 1 life. JD untaps and plays a High Market. Tapping out, he casts Crested Sunmare into the Glare and gains 1 life. At his end step, JD makes a 5/5 horse for gaining life that turn. I untap without a land drop, move straight into combat, swinging Mina and Den at Mauricio. No blocks, Mauricio takes 4 damage. In my second main, I tap 1 mountain for Skull Clamp. Before the end of my turn, Heda casts Izzet Charm, choosing to draw 2 and discard 2 cards. Heda untaps and plays a Battlefield Forge. Tapping 4 mana, casts Primal Amulet, passing. Mauricio untaps and with nothing to do, passes to JD. JD untaps and plays a Temple of the False God. He taps 4 mana for a Ajani, Adversary of Tyrants, choosing to put a +1 on each of up to 2 target creatures. He moves to combat and swings both horses at me for 12 damage. In his second main, JD sacrifices one of his tokens to High Market and gains a life. creating a new token at his end step. I untap, and again don't have a land to play. I cast Xenagos the Reveler and decide to make a 2/2 satyr. Moving to combat, I swing Mina and Den at Mauricio for 4 and the satyr at Hera for 2. No blocks, and I pass my turn. Hera untaps, and flashes back Faithless Looting from his graveyard, drawing 2 and discarding 2 cards. Then plays an island for turn, and casts ShuYun. I then remind Hera about his counters on his Primal Amulet, and he passes. Mauricio draws for turn and plays a tapped Memorial to Genius. And moving to his main phase, casts Baral, Chief of Compliance. Before Mauricio's turn is over, JD taps his Talisman to gain 1 life and make a 5/5 horse token. JD untaps and draws for turn. He taps 4 mana, playing a Rock's Faithmender. He then ticks Ajani up, putting a +1 counter on 2 of his creatures, and moves to combat, swinging 2 6/6 horses at Mauricio. In his second main, JD decides to pass. I untap and draw for turn, playing a Temple of the False God as my 5th land drop. I decide to plus Xenagos and make 2 green mana. Using that, I tap for 3 and cast Primal Command. Realizing that it says non-creature, I decide to put Ajani on top of JD's library. And searching my library for a creature card, I find an Avenger of Zendikar and put it into my hand. I pay 1 and equip my Skull Clamp to my satyr and pass the turn. Hera untaps and draws for turn. He plays a mountain and rearranges his lines. He moves to combat, swinging ShuYun at JD. Tapping an island, cast Crypsis. Untapping ShuYun. Triggering prowess, Hera pays red and white into ShuYun to give him double strike, and puts another counter on his Primal Amulet. He then casts Fumble, targeting Mina and Den, returning them to my hand. This gives ShuYun his second prowess trigger and adds another counter to the Primal Amulet, making it 3. Tapping the temple, he casts Sure Strike, giving ShuYun +3/+0 and first strike, adding a 3rd prowess counter and a 4th counter to Primal Amulet, then flipping into Primal Wellspring. Realizing his spells are not being reduced anymore, Hera isn't able to cast another spell and is done. Unable to block, JD takes 18 commander damage. At Hera's end step, JD sacrifices a horse token to High Market, gains 2 life, and makes a new token. Mauricio untaps and draws. He casts Izzet Charm, choosing to draw 2 and discard 2 cards. With nothing else going on, JD taps his Talisman for 1 mana and gains 2 life, making a new horse as Mauricio passes. JD untaps and draws. Moving into his combat, JD swings the Crested Sunmare and 3 horse tokens at Hedda for 22 damage. With no blocks, Hedda takes 22. In his second main, JD casts Karlov of the Ghost Council, then sacrifices a horse token to high market, gaining 2 life. JD puts 4 counters on Karlov and makes a new horse token at his end step. I untap and draw for turn. I cast Cultivate, putting a forest tapped onto the battlefield and 1 into my hand. Forgetting I have not played a land for turn, I instead plus Xenagos and add green to my mana pool. To recast Mina and Den. I play what I think is my second land for turn, but is really my first. I decide to move past combat and end my turn, passing to Hedda. Hedda untaps and draws for turn. Realizing he needs to leave up some resources, he passes to Mauricio. Mauricio untaps and draws for turn. Taps 2 lands to cast Firemind's Research. Before he passes, JD taps his talisman for 1 mana and gains 2 life. This makes another horse, and JD forgets to put a counter on Karlov. JD untaps and draws for turn. He plays a Plains and taps for 3 and gains 2 life. Casts Whisper Silk Cloak, which Hedda counters with Arcane Denial. With the Prowess trigger on the stack, pays 2 mana to give ShuYun double strike until the end of turn. Moving to combat, JD swings 3 5/5 horses at Hedda. Hedda casts Savage Alliance and decides to block one of the horses. Realizing this later, the horses have indestructibility as long as Crested Sunmare is on the battlefield. JD moves his horses and passes the turn. I untap and draw a card. I play a forest and cast my commander, Wort the Raid Mother. When she enters the battlefield, she creates 2 red and green goblin tokens. I then tick up Xenagos and float 5 green mana. And tapping 2 mana, I cast Avenger of Zendikar. Mauricio counters this with Arcane Denial. He draws and discards due to his Baral trigger. I move to combat and swing Mina and Din at Mauricio. In my second main, I equip a Goblin token with Skull Clamp and draw 2 cards. I play a tapped Oseju, who shelters all as my second land for turn and pass to Hedda. Hedda untaps and draws a card. He moves to combat and swings ShuYun at JD. He casts Apostle's Blessing, targeting ShuYun. And giving him protection from white, he then puts 2 mana into ShuYun, giving him double strike. With no blocks, JD dies to commander damage, and Hedda passes the turn. Mauricio untaps and draws a card. He plays a mountain, and finally has 4 lands. He casts Windfall, and gets to put a counter on his Firemind's Research. I have the most cards in hand with 7, and everyone gets new hands. Mauricio decides to risk it and casts Stitch in Time. He calls Evens and rolls a 2. He decides to swing at Hera and take him from 6 to 3. Mauricio ends his turn. Mauricio untaps, draws, and begins his extra turn. He casts Frantic Search, drawing 2 cards, then discarding 2 cards and untapping 3 lands. Mauricio moves to combat and swings both creatures at Hera. Hera casts Abrade, targeting Baral, and takes 2 damage, putting Hera at 1. In Mauricio's second main, he casts Elixir of Immortality and passes. I untap and draw a card. I pay 1 for a Soul Ring. Tapping the Soul Ring, I cast Gruul Signet. Tapping a forest and the Signet, I cast Sakura Tribe Elder. After some careful contemplation and not knowing what to do after the windfall, I take up Xenagos and float a combination of mana. With 2 of the floating mana, I cast Krenko's Command. As I cast it, I tap 2 red tokens to conspire the spell and get 4 goblins. I skull clamp 2 of the new goblins and draw 4 cards. I play a Wooded Foothills for my second land for turn. I move to combat and swing Mina and Den at Hera and Wort at Mauricio. Hera takes his own life by tapping his Battlefield Forge for a white and losing 1 life. Mauricio casts Hypothesizzle, drawing 2 cards, then discarding a non-land card. And targets Wort for 4 damage. In my second main, I cast Regrowth and target Tooth and Nail to return it to my hand. Moving to my end step, Mauricio pays 2 and removes 5 counters from his research and does 5 damage to me. I decide to crack my Wooded Foothills searching for a mountain or forest card. Mauricio untaps and draws a card. I grab the Stomping Grounds and put it onto the battlefield tapped. He plays an island and casts Ponder, looking at the top 3 and putting them back in any order. He decides to shuffle his library. I cast Harrow, sacrificing a forest to search for 2 more basic land cards. Mauricio draws from Ponder. He taps his Soul Ring to pay for a Fire Diamond, which enters tapped. Mauricio ends his turn. I untap, reorganize my lands, and draw a card. I uptick Xenagos and add a combination of 6 red and green mana to my mana pool. Tapping the Temple of the False God, I cast Wort. She enters and creates 2 new red and green goblins. I then cast Tooth and Nail, paying 2 life to Boseiju so it can't be countered. I tap 2 creatures to conspire the Tooth and Nail. On the first resolution, I search my library for 2 creature cards, finding Craterhoof Behemoth and Perforos. For the second Tooth and Nail, I put 2 creatures from my hand into play. I decide to let Perforos enter play, then Craterhoof, letting Mauricio take 2 from Perforos. I start to count up the damage, and it's lethal coming at Mauricio. No blocks, and I take the first game.